All right, everybody, we are going to continue the Nathan party over here, over on Digital Gnosis. I'm not going to be running a 5-hour stream, but Nathan just did a 5-hour stream. And I got to say, it was one of my favorite streams that I have seen in a long time. I liked every conversation that he had. So I just thought that it was really cool. He started off intending to review a video from Emerson Green on consciousness. And I don't know if he ever got to it. It was like 2 minutes. So I think I'm doing a little better than Nathan on actually getting through the videos I start to review. And there's so many to review. And I've had a few videos come out this week. In just the past couple of days, I had my discussion with Curiosity Guy. So go check that out on my channel. I threw them up there. I didn't even get the thumbnails on them yet. So I will. I will. And so Curiosity Guy and I reviewed a discussion. We actually reviewed Ask Yourself's review of his discussion with Alex O'Connor. So it's a meta review. I think it's my first review of a review. And then I also had a discussion with Derek McAllister. So you may have seen in the stream, I was critiquing Derek's videos on moral relativism. Derek reached out. We ended up having a whole discussion. And we decided to post that. I feel like we didn't like he really wanted to get like my view and understand my position in metaethics. So towards the second half of that discussion, we sort of pivot and get into that. So, I might as well do a call in this time. I haven't done one in a long time, so let me throw that in the chat. So one second, then I'll have to go over on YouTube and pin it. So I'll do that. All right. And I think some people got confused about where my videos were. Give me a second. I had to restart the stream. There was an audio issue. One moment, gonna fix that. It looks like it's working. Okay. Okay. So we should be good to go on that. Oh, no, there's one more to fix. Give me a second. And yeah, people want to come up. I'm happy to talk about consciousness, free will, metaethics, whatever it is you might want to talk about. Yep, there's still some funky stuff going on my streams because they mess things up. One moment. Just getting all this fixed. Yep, that one's deleted. All right. Yeah, veganism isn't really a topic that I discuss on my channel. I don't. It's just I don't really do normative ethics or applied ethics type stuff. So it's just not something I really address. Sorry about that. I know a lot of people seem to want me to talk about that, but I'm not the person to talk about it. When are you going to stream? Roblox? I don't know what that means. And what's up, Nitty? Oh, well, I guess Seabass, you were the first here, so you get 1,000 Lance loot. Nitty, you get 500, and Raph, you get 250. I almost forgot about that. Yeah, so Super Critical Snake says, did you catch most of that German guy on Nathan's stream? I think he had some problems with quietus use. I did. It never became clear to me what the problems were. I like the conversation. I thought it was funny how he was like Nathan's like looking for an argument, and the guys just wanted to have a conversation. But yeah, I thought it was good conversation. I missed a couple gaps. There's been stuff going on. I stopped and had dinner. I had to do a few chores. So there are a few bits and pieces where I missed things, but I was mostly playing it on double speed and like cranking up my brain power to try to track it at that point. Beckman says hello. Yeah, so this is a random stream just because I wanted to capitalize on Nathan doing a stream. So I already planned with someone else to review Emerson's video. So I would go just continue picking up where Nathan left off and reviewing Emerson's video. But, I already have plans with somebody else. So I don't know if they want me mentioning that they're going to be on the show, but they've been on the show before. I'll say that. So they'll be on to review that video and hopefully it goes well. Um, no, I don't know that much about sentimentalism, but I wouldn't consider it a plausible view of morality. JPW says, I just finished your stream with Derek. I confess I was a little frustrated that you didn't lean harder on the unenforceability of objective morality. Yeah, maybe I could have leaned harder on that. I'm not always looking to be real pushy about things, but yeah, that is something about moral realism that I've always found very strange. Is that the way realists will describe it is they'll say, "Oh, it has authority over us." What do they mean by authority? Like they'll characterize authority in ways that I just find so obscure. I see authority. I mean, you could use it in metaphorical senses that make sense in a certain in certain respects, but in everyday practical respects, the kinds of authority, like authority, is typically cashed out in social terms. Like people have authority over other people, and what lends that authority weight is in the enforceability of the authority. So a government doesn't really have any authority over it. Might have like nominal authority or legal authority or like authority in principle. If like technically the government has empowered itself with the authority to like regulate the law in a given area. But if it doesn't have the ability to enforce that law, if it doesn't have police or military or whatever agents of the government to execute its will, it doesn't actually have any authority in practice. And that's the kind of authority that I think people are responsive to. Authority that could, in principle, even if not in practice, but in principle, could possibly make. I guess no, I do mean in practice. What am I talking about? Uh, People care about authority that could like feasibly have some impact on you. That your goals could be thwarted, punishments could be enacted on you, resources could be taken from you. That's the kind of authority that people I think are responsive to. Authority that makes a difference to your life, that interferes with your goals or desires. But when it comes to the kind of authority, the quote unquote authority that non naturalist realism is supposed to have over us, it doesn't have that power. It has no practical, like actual ability to, there's no consequences if you just opt not to comply with the stance independent moral facts. There's this great quote from David Lewis. Let me see if I could remember it. No, I'm not going to remember it. Let me see if I could find it. One second. I could never find this. I've saved it several times on my computer, and then when I go to look for it, I can't find it. Where is that David Lewis quote? Ah, very frustrating. Why is it so hard to find this quote? Hey, I'm gonna put this on the audience. There is a quote from David Lewis where he's talking about authority, and he said like, why would we fear the authority? And then he mentions like an executioner or something along those lines. Yeah, yeah. So Jimothy says, I saved that Lewis quote the last time you mentioned about the hangman. Yeah, but why, if I search for it, I put in David Lewis hangman and I don't get anything? What is that dang quote? Yeah, it doesn't come up. Someone find it, please. I'm not going to sit in the stream silent while I search for something. I don't know. Why is it so mysterious to find this quote? Okay. Uh, anyway, the point he makes there is it's something like, look, if you're going to tell me that I'm not complying with the stance independent moral facts, on penalty of being like, what are you going to do? Label me with some philosophical terminology or some folk label? Like, well, according to ordinary language, if you do this, it's morally wrong. Okay. Like given the way a certain linguistic community speaks, given a certain language game, according to that language game, certain labels are verbally applicable to me if I violate the rules that are inconsistent with the labeling system used in that language game. Um, okay, so if I violate the rule, you're going to say, oh, well, technically, if you don't do that, like, okay, let me give an example. let's say I stipulate with along with my friends, if you do the things on the list that we come up with, you're a jerk. Like just whatever's on the list, you're a jerk. And so you go and do one of those things, and we say, okay, well, according to this list, you're a jerk. The natural reaction to that is, okay, and like, are y'all going to do something to me? Or are you going to assault me or throw me in prison? No, no, no. It's just according to this list. This list says, if you do the things on this list, you are a jerk. That's what the list says. So you did it. So you technically you're a jerk according to this rules that we stipulated. That is about what the force that moral realism amounts to is given a certain way people are disposed to think. They're going to slap these labels on you if you violate these rules. Now, uh, that's all it looks like to me. But even if you add some metaphysical backing to it, but it's not just this language game. Like, on the presumption that moral realism is actually true and that moral realists aren't just wrong and engage in a very confused way of speaking and thinking. Okay, so you violated the stance independent moral rules. Now what? What happens? As far as I could tell, absolutely nothing. Because what are they going to say to you? That you're irrational, like you violated norms of rationality? Okay, well, if that conception of rationality is not an instrumental one, that would mean that in deviating from what's rational, you've achieved your goals. You've just failed to comply with some external standard of rationality. Okay, well, if you care about that, then that might be a concern to you. Hey, given that you care about complying with the like objective conception of rationality, what you're doing if you don't comply with the moral facts is you're technically not being objectively rational. If a person cares about that, they might go, "Oh, well, dang, that's what I want to do, so I'll do that." But what if they don't care? What if they just care about being instrumentally rational? Then they might shrug and go, "Okay, so then I'm not being rational according to that conception of rationality." And like, what follows from that? Like it's just labels. Who cares? So I don't really think it has any authority. I think it's a very I think that's one of the things that makes it weird is that it's to me so obviously toothless that I don't understand why realists think realism is so much better than anti-realist positions about morality. Like they treat it in many cases as though like if you don't have it, all hell will break loose. But what does it actually do if it is true? As far as I could tell, nothing. It's very strange that people are disposed to think that it's like really important that it's true and that it would be a disaster if it wasn't true. Moral realism, that is. Oh, right. Did anybody find that quote? Swagmaster Doritos asked me a question. I'm not familiar enough with the terminology off the top of my head about the different types of freedom. So if you can, I'm sure I've seen these before. I don't read a lot of stuff on the free will literature. I read a lot of stuff on the experimental philosophy of free will. But if you could remind me or tell me what those terms mean, then I think I could address those questions fairly readily. So JPW, oh, okay. So going back to the whole thing about the enforceability, you used multiple examples of this in the past, e.g., engaging a robber, and I wish you'd forced a response. Well, I wasn't there to debate with him. So, I don't know if I want to force responses if it's not a debate. You know what I mean? Okay. Clashman, I appreciate the question, but I'm not really sure I want to address personal questions like that right now. JPW says, not a matter of proving you're right, but just unpacking the implications of the initial claim. Yeah, no, fair enough. I could have probably said more about what my concern is. So maybe Derek will see this video, which started out with me talking about this a bit more. And I am genuinely interested. Where was that question about free will? Like I could look up the terminology. It's the kind of thing where because I don't. Okay, so when I did my qualifying exams to move into my PhD, I did it on one of the exams was on the free will literature that purports to show that free will positively correlates with a bunch of positive psychological traits, and that there's a bunch of causal research, Volson Schooler, some other papers that purport to show that reducing belief in free will causes bad behavior. So I'm familiar with that literature. I've looked into the literature on free will adjacent to that. Like I read some like Dirk Perboom stuff and a bit of other stuff, but it's been a long time since I dug deeply into that. And just a lot of the term, like, I'm familiar with like the notion of desert-based moral responsibility. and some of the other notions of responsibility, take charge responsibility. That stuff was relevant to some of the points that I was making, but some of the terminology you're using here, it looks vaguely familiar, but I just haven't used it or see like, well, I guess I never used it because I've never written anything about this stuff, but I haven't read it in, almost 10 years. So it's just kind of like the consciousness stuff. If it's not metaethics or X-Fi stuff these days, a lot of it I'm real rusty on, but I'm going to actually make a note of that and look that up so that I could better address questions like that. Because I don't go onto my stream purporting to be super knowledgeable about everything. I know my three things. So where is that? Where is that? I'll make a note. Where's my notes here? Cool. So I'll look into that. If you leave a comment after the video, I could try to address it there. All right. What else we got? Seabass says, can you briefly explain your position? Are you a non-cognitivist? I am not a non-cognitivist. So I call myself an anti-realist quietist. I'll try to give a brief version. So the traditional anti-realist views would be error theory, non-cognitivism, and I call them stance-dependent cognitivist accounts. So, okay, error theorists basically say, hey, when people are trying to make moral claims, when people are make moral claims, those claims purport to describe stance-independent moral facts. There are no stance-independent moral facts, so all of those claims are false. Non-cognitivism says when people are making moral claims, they're not really in the business of trying to say things that could be described as true or false. They're actually expressing some exclusively non-propositional stuff that couldn't be true or false. It could be just emotions, could be commands. So some statement like murder is wrong or stealing is wrong would be best understood to convey something like stealing or don't steal, which are not propositions. And so there's no stance-independent moral facts because moral discourse just it's not even attempting to refer to facts of that kind. And then finally, the stance-dependent accounts, typically they're going to be a lot of conventional forms of relativism, so cultural relativism, subjectivism. They don't have to be. Not all forms of relativism are necessarily anti-realist forms, but the ones that make things relative to stances are. And then you have like constructivist positions. You might have certain forms of constructivism that say, hey, there's some procedure that you can engage in, and this procedure that yields what the moral facts are, but the procedure is in some way fundamentally dependent on stances. So that might look like something like ideal observer theory, where you say the moral facts are the facts that a fully informed and perfectly rational agent would endorse. That's what you should do. So why do I say this third category is not relativism or subjectivism? Well, technically speaking, I take relativism to be the view that the truth of moral claims can vary based on which standards it's indexed to. So relative to this standard or that standard. So the same moral claim could be that when one person makes it could be true, and when another person makes it could be false. If you're an ideal observer theorist, there's only one correct standard of morality. So it looks superficially in some ways a lot more like moral realism. And in practice, it may actually operate a lot more like realism. There, you're not going to have these situations where people have different moral standards that are, like you could say, both true, even though they conflict with one another. So why? So those are the standard three. Why don't I endorse those? Well, all three fundamentally turn on a semantic thesis. So they have a thesis about the meaning of moral claims. And I take the traditional versions of these accounts to all presuppose what Michael Gill's philosopher that wrote this paper called Indeterminacy and Variability in Metaethics back in 2009, what Michael Gill calls the uniformity determinacy assumption. So according to Gill, these accounts tend to presume that all moral claims must share a uniform and determinate semantic content. Like they all share the same content. They all mean the same thing. And so all three of these accounts would presume that all, or at least most, allowing for some error and cleanup with one's account. You could say, oh, well, sometimes like a person that's new to speaking the language may not use it in the sort of conventional way. There may be aberrant uses, ironic uses. There may be idiosyncratic people that speak a little weirdly, but there's still going to be like a primary or central usage. All three presume that there's the central or primary usage to moral claims that fits with their analysis. So they all turn on these analyses of language that I think rely on false assumptions about how language works. And so I reject all three traditional accounts. And because I see the framing of the realist, anti-realist dispute as turning so much on these semantic analyses of ordinary language. And I think that they're both the methods they use to approach ordinary language, which are non-empirical, and the non-empirical with a qualification. Some people might take the questions to be empirical, some might not. So I guess I'll pause to qualify. I said this is going to be short, and I guess it's not that short. Sorry. So if you want to say moral claims are propositions, are you making like an analytic claim, or are you making some sort of like non-analytic claim that could be investigated empirically? Like, can you operationalize it and go and empirically study the claim? If you're making the former, I don't think language works that way, so I would reject that account. If you mean the latter, you'd have to be real careful about what you mean by that. But the thing is, even if philosophers in the 20th century, where most of these positions were developed, well, I guess all of them, at least in their standard forms, were developed, or maybe before the 20th century, but like basically, all the traditional positions, um, if they don't take them to be empirical questions, like the questions about the meaning of moral claims, I would reject them on those grounds. If they do take them to be empirical questions, why don't they do any empirical research? Like if they are so, empirical in principle, why don't they actually look at empirical evidence in practice? So I have big problems with the way that meta-ethicists have traditionally gone about investigating these questions. I endorse, with respect to what you could call the semantic thesis, what I call folk metaethical indeterminacy. So this is part of Gill's alternative proposal to uniformity and determinacy, is indeterminacy and variability. So I think it's mostly indeterminacy with a bit of variability. So since I don't endorse the traditional semantic theses, I can't really endorse any of the traditional positions. So I'm an anti-realist, but there's not really a way to square my position with the traditional accounts. Sorry if that was longer. You asked for a short description. Uh, CBS also says, "What were the points things about?" That's a mystery. You'll have to discover. Sapir says, "Okay, I'm in. LOL. Hi." Yeah, yeah. I saw you were in Nathan's stream. So what have you been? Why are you in streams for like 1,000 hours? All right, Jimothy says, "I'm on my phone, but if no one grabs it before, okay." So if you got that quote, I'd like to see it. Yeah, if you're talking about like Descartes, like I think therefore I am, like cogito ergo sum, then yeah, I reject that. I don't know whether I would say that has that much directly to do with my views about consciousness. So I would call myself a qualia quietist and a meta illusionist. So very roughly, I think that when philosophers, at least in analytic philosophy, talk about consciousness, a lot of them have taken to thinking of consciousness as this singular and sort of essential or fundamental thing, a specific phenomena that we need to offer an account of. And many of them think that we have direct access to it, or that it's characterized by certain sorts of properties that we have some sort of private access to. And those properties are ineffable. You couldn't really communicate them to other people in third personal terms. And that's what I think people are referencing much of the time when they use the term qualia, or in other times phenomenal states. And then phenomenal consciousness is consciousness understood to be characterized, constituted, or including qualia or phenomenal states. My issue with that is that I don't think proponents of these views are able to communicate what they mean by these terms. I think that any attempt by them to communicate what they mean either is failed distinction. It's a vicious circle, as you know. Pete Mandic describes it likewise as like their characterizations are viciously circular. Just like A is B, B is C, C is A, and they just go in circles with this terminology. I think that there are issues in the way that people are conceptualizing various aspects of our experience and the way that we are disposed to think and speak, and that all sort of congeals into this notion that there's some special phenomena that you know all that language is pointing to. I think, is it Dennett or somebody else that talks about, like, for Pete's sake, like, what are sakes? People can be disposed to think in certain ways, and there's not really a specific thing that all that language is pointing to. So that notion of phenomenal consciousness, I think that the talk around it is just so deeply confused that I don't think that the notion of phenomenal consciousness is meaningful. I think it's like literally nonsense, and that nothing really can be said about it. So I'm a qualia quietist about that. Now, Does that mean I think we just shouldn't study consciousness? No. So I would typically say I do think, something's going on with us. So I have like, if you ask me to describe what my experiences are like, there's a lot of stuff I could say. Like, it seems like I have this rich field of view where I see colors and sights, smells, sounds, touch. It all seems like it's happening simultaneously. It seems like I feel like a self persisting through all this. I could describe the past. I could talk about my plans in the future. This sense of simultaneity, this sense of an ongoing internal narrative, this sense that there are certain aspects of my way of engaging with the world that it would, at least I can't see how you could fully articulate all of them. It looks like there's lots of stuff that I experience that I could never fully express or convey to someone else in a way that they could understand. So all of that together, it looks to me like, even though I don't have an intuition that I have qualia, like it doesn't seem like my experiences are genuinely ineffable, or fundamentally incommunicable. At least seems really damn hard. Uh, but I don't have qualia intuitions, but I do have this like Cartesian theater thing going on. I don't make the mistake of endorsing that as a conception of consciousness, but it does seem to me like I'm sitting behind my eyes, looking out at the world, tasting and smelling and touching and seeing and hearing everything, and then it's all happening to like me all at the same time. Um, Even though a lot of that is not true, and so I have an illusionist adjacent position, which is that I think that our experiences systematically misrepresent themselves to us in ways. Um, in part, I think that a large chunk of this is a natural way that a lot of human psychology works. It might require some, or it might be enhanced by a certain degree of enculturation and language acquisition. Um, and so I think there's certain aspects of the illusionist approach that are ubiquitous, like pretty much, most people are subject to some type of illusion. But I don't endorse the more, like, I guess you could say, like propositional type of illusionism, in that I don't think that most people think that they have qualia or think that reality is the way a lot of philosophers describe. So in that sense, I'm a meta illusionist, in that there's one sense in which I think people are subject to an illusion, the kind of illusion I described. There's another sense in which I don't think that they're sort of mistakenly subject to or committed to the view that they have qualia or phenomenal states. And to the extent that illusionists think that they have qualia or phenomenal states, I don't think that they think that they have those. And there's empirical research on this. Justin Sitzma, Edward Mashry, um, Ozdemir. I don't know how to say all their names, and yeah, but there's a growing literature on this. It's not a huge literature that has attempted to see whether philosophers and non-philosophers attribute mental states to different sorts of agents in the same sorts of ways. It doesn't look like they do. I think that there are some methodological shortcomings to this research. Not that I don't think it's really cool research, but it's challenging to present questions to non-philosophers that are philosophically relevant and are operationalized in a way that reliably tell you about whatever sort of proto or nascent philosophical views they may have. And it may be that they don't have any. But so far, and if they don't, it's very hard to find out that they don't have something. It's a lot easier to find what's there than to find what's not there. In any case, that research so far has been largely sort of negative with respect to finding evidence that people do think that they have qualia or phenomenal states. People are not really responsive to like p-zombie issues and that sort of thing. Does that mean that they think like I do? No. I mean, it might, but I'm not convinced. So even research that's pointing in a direction that you could say that I like, or I'm biased towards wanting to accept, I'm still skeptical. I don't buy, I'm not convinced by the results of these studies. And I don't think anybody should be. Like, I think you could say, okay, the studies are suggestive, but with any research in psychology, it's very, very difficult. And it's going to take, more research to really nail down what's going on. And I don't know if the authors of those studies think their studies are like definitive, but they probably take them to be more suggestive than I do. But I certainly have a lot of respect for the research. I do have a blog series where I talk about the research and I offer some critiques of it, and I go through somebody else's critique that I thought was quite good. They did a lot more detailed work critiquing the methods behind some of those studies. So yeah, basically, I think a lot of philosophers think consciousness is a certain way, and I think that they're wrong about that. And they're wrong about that because of their induction in philosophy, which I think has caused them to think in ways that are very misguided. As far as what is going on, I think it's a series of empirical questions that we need to ask about how human cognition works. Um, and I don't really do research on that myself. So that research on consciousness and what's like actually going on with human minds Um, that's continuing apace, and I don't think it really needs all the, or at least not very much of the speculation that philosophers engage in certain respects. I think a lot of the views about like qualia and stuff is a total distraction and a waste of time. Doesn't mean I don't think philosophers can contribute enormously to like the best approaches to consciousness. In fact, I think they have. So people like Keith Frankish and Dan Dennett, I think, are so much more on the right track with approaching consciousness, and it's telling that they approach it in a way that draws heavily on empirical studies. So, I mean, consciousness explained exemplifies this approach and really digging into how human cognition actually works. So, that's my approach to consciousness. I'm an empiricist about it. Um, I think that the kinds of processes and phenomena that we're describing fragment. There's not this one unified notion of consciousness, but rather a variety of different sorts of things are going on. And I would say roughly that they're best captured in terms of some sort of something like some type of functionalist approach or something like that. Zachman asked a good question, and I don't have a good answer. What's a simple good argument for anti-realism? I don't have one. I don't have a good argument for anti-realism. What I tend to go around these days saying is I don't think there's any good arguments for moral realism. So I play a lot more defense than I do offense. Uh, I should probably have some arguments, but I don't like that formalistic style of like throwing syllogisms at people that typifies a lot of like public debate spaces and analytic philosophy more generally. So you're not going to get a lot of that from me. I tend to take a lot more holistic and abductive approach. Um, any argument you make that's like premise one, premise two, conclusion, uh, those premises are probably going to take on board. They're like mega enthymemes. So basically arguments with unstated premises. So, okay, so whatever argument I presented would rely on background assumptions, which would in turn rely on further background assumptions, which would in turn rely on further background assumptions. And so any sort of like local argument at the end of the branch of a tree is, for me, for that argument to be effective would require traversing back up to the branch to where it joins with the other branches, all the way to the trunk, all the way to the roots. So I take a pragmatist view towards philosophy, and I think my views on qualia quietism stem from something like that. They're motivated by more fundamental commitments. And so if I were to try to present an argument for qualia quietism, it would rest on my assumptions about how language works, my views on epistemology, my views on what it is we're trying to do, my views on various aspects of how language works, on a bunch of empirical assumptions like that the studies that I've read and am familiar with are true and that I've correctly understood them. And so everything is built up so much up it's built up so much on the foundations of other sorts of facts and considerations. Any argument at the extremity that's so dependent on all those background assumptions, trying to present that argument, uh, it's just the tip of a very deep iceberg. And so it's kind of a waste of time. I think you have to talk more about people's underlying meta philosophies and their more fundamental views, rather than just throwing syllogisms at people and then having to peel back all the layers and recognize that the reasons they don't accept the premises you accept and vice versa is because you have fundamentally different worldviews in the background. That's what's actually behind people's views. So, do I have a simple good argument? No, and I'm not sure that there is one. I don't think there are a lot of simple good arguments in philosophy. I think that's one of the methodological problems with the way a lot of analytic philosophers work, is that I think they fail to appreciate how weak, your conventional modus ponens and modus tollens actually are. A lot of these like deductive arguments, they're all question begging. They're all, if you, so, as I've been talking with, Kane B has a video on this. So check out Kane B's video on question begging. But depending on how you construe deductive arguments, I don't really think there are any substantive arguments where the premises entail the conclusions. I think this is some sort of severe misunderstanding of the way that logic works that seems highly prevalent in analytic philosophy and among people in the orbit of analytic philosophy that think you could throw around deductive arguments. They're not completely vacuous, and I think they're all vacuous. I don't, so, uh, you know, deduction is out. So what am I going to do? I'm going to give you some kind of abductive argument, and the abductive argument is going to draw on so many different sources that it would be a complete disaster to try to present it in any short form. So to consider something like once I'm relying on abduction instead of something like a deduction, uh, you're drawing on a lot of different sources of evidence that sort of triangulate on the answer that you're providing. It would be a bit like providing evidence of the theory of evolution or other sorts of theories in the sciences, where it's not like you just say genetic evidence done. Uh, what really seals the deal is that there's mutually corroborating evidence across a wide range of different fields. So geology, biology, chemistry, the fossil record, genetics, comparative morphology. So when it comes to questions in evolutionary biology, what really makes the theory so well established isn't simply that the evidence in any one of these domains is incredibly powerful, even though it is. Like you might be like evolution, like the organismic diversity in life being primarily the product of natural selection and other evolutionary forces, um, would be well established probably just by looking at genetics or just by looking at the fossil record. But the fact that the fossil record and the genetics and like, I don't know, endogenous retroviruses and comparative morphology, the fact that so many of these things line up so well, that's what really seals the deal. Because even if you thought any one or two of these things was, just serendipitous for the theory or an extraordinary coincidence, for there to be five miracles in a row is just mm-mm. That's going to you're starting when you get these low probabilities and you start multiplying them, things get out of hand pretty quickly, and that's what really makes it so probable. And it's the same thing when you're offering abductive arguments in a broader sense, is that you would have to appeal to a variety of considerations and say, look, I think I would have to make an independent case for these like 10 different points. And then conditional on me convincing you of those 10 different points, I think they all kind of once you're convinced of all those 10, the view just falls right out of the rest of those views. And then there's not much more work to do. So I think if people want to convince people of their sort of the sort of philosophical views that they would answer on a fill paper survey or something like that. Well, some of those are pretty fundamental, but like the sort of like the beliefies that people wave around in a banner, I'm a realist, I'm a theist, that sort of thing. These are rooted in deeper commitments and convictions that people have. And I think people should explore those, and they should explore the more fundamental presuppositions and methods that they're using to do philosophy. And I think if people could pick at and debate those and settle on more similar methods, you would see a lot more convergence in practice than we currently observe, because people keep debating at the extremities and not at the roots. Okay. See, I see some stuff where I don't know what y'all are talking about. Clashman the Third says, my pet theory is that people feel like social pressure is a genuine external force, and they see the force as an external ought to be normal. Okay, well, um, yeah. So the whole thing about social pressure as as an external force, they might. It would be interesting. I floated this idea with David Newman and like a couple of my colleagues. We talked about this back when I was more engaged on Facebook in Facebook arguments, where we talked about it being similar to what is it called, apophenia, like basically where basic there's the main one I'm thinking of is pareidolia, but it's the sort of a right that it's the more general sense, yeah. Perceiving perceiving connections where there aren't really any connections. So people have this natural tendency to. Sorry, I had to look it up. I'm like brain fart. What exactly is apophenia, and rather than like pareidolia in particular? So pareidolia is like when you see like images, like when you see images and clouds and faces and like Jesus and the toast and that sort of thing. That's one particular way of this manifesting. But one of the things that I've suspected and that we've floated around, some of the other people that I talk to a lot, is this possibility that moral realism and maybe some other beliefs or tendencies that people have in philosophy are driven by them seeing or connecting or seeing connections or patterns where there aren't really any particular patterns. And it might be that people are, there might be something like a kind of emotion reality apophenia where your emotions are mistakenly perceived as features of the world. I don't know, but yeah, I think something cognitive and like kind of fundamental can misfire in people and lead them to really feel strong convictions that things are true or meaningful that are not true or are not meaningful. It's difficult to empirically demonstrate that, And so that's just at the moment just completely speculative. But it's the kind of thing that could, in principle, be tested. But I think it'd be very, very hard to make a strong empirical case that people are making philosophical mistakes on the basis of really, really difficult to track and test features of their cognition. Oh, right. Ah, Jimothy got the quote. Let's see when that was. Let's see how slow I am getting through this. It was 9:20. It was 30 minutes ago. Wow. Okay. Jimothy got the quote. And this is the quote from David Lewis. And this relates to what I was talking about at the start of the stream when I was talking about the lack of enforceability behind moral realism. So here's what David Lewis says. Why care about objective value or ethical reality? The sanction is that if you do not, your inner states will fail to deserve folk theoretical names, not a threat that will strike terror into the hearts of the wicked. But whoever thought that philosophy could replace the hangman? And so that's exactly it. Look at that last line. Who thought philosophy could replace the hangman? The idea there is that like philosophers, I think it was Dan Dennett that once said, like, it's like philosophers are in a quest to find an argument that's so compelling that if you don't accept the conclusion, you die. So it philosophers feel like the arguments have force and power. Like, it's almost like they think it's like magic incantations. And like, I'm like premise one, premise two, therefore conclusion. And then your audience is just going to go like it's the force and they're all going to get knocked over. Or you could like force choke people into submission. It's like, my premises are more powerful than yours. No. And like, that's the no. You could present all the premises in the world and someone could go, yeah, well, I don't give a shit. I don't care. And this manifests like when you talk about that person and that like mugging you in the alleyway and you're like, you see joke videos. It's like, hey, if someone tries to take your wallet, just point out to them it's wrong and it's illegal. And you can just imagine how ridiculous that would be. Someone's like, hey, give me your wallet. And you're like, well, that's illegal. So no. Like maybe they'll shoot you if you do that. You don't want to do that. You can hand over your damn wallet or do whatever you got to do. But you know, as if pointing out or persuading the person that it's objectively wrong, that's the way you do things. Realists will often act like that's like, we need this objective morality or you just couldn't keep people in line. No, we have jails and fines and that sort of stuff. Now, do we do a good job with it? No. But that's the stuff that, does something. The stance on independent moral facts don't do anything. So they're no reasonable substitute. Maybe you might think if you could convince people that they're real, if the beliefs in them could motivate people, but only if the people are motivated by caring about what these facts are. And if that's the case, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen any good evidence that a belief in moral realism like keeps people in line or something. Yeah, Jimothy, yes, there you go, big dog. Okay. Oh, cool. So Swag said more. Leeway freedom is the capacity to do otherwise. Sourcehood freedom is to be the causal source of, or in the weaker forms the eventual bearer of one's will. Yeah, so I have issues with this whole to do otherwise type language. I'm not sure exactly what that means. So I'd probably have to dig into the literature and see how they're disambiguating and clarifying things. Latier says, where are people asking questions? The one to appear on the screen. Oh, so I'm using StreamYard, so I could just put your questions up on the screen like this. So that's up to me. See, I could put it up there, I could take it away. So that's me doing it. And I'm just picking stuff from the stream. So it's just questions people are putting in the chat here. So Brett C says, couldn't it just be that if objective morality was true, it just doesn't need a practical authority? Why would it need to go further than if someone's goals and values were to pursue good? They would have an objective compass. It doesn't need to. Like, I'm not saying it's false because it's vacuous and empty and isn't able to do anything. I'm just saying it's vacuous, empty, and not able to do anything if it were true. That's it. So someone wants to say it's true and that's it. Okay, great. Well, I'm not interested. So have a nice day. And I would be curious for people that do care about it. Why would you, like, let's say that there's stance independent moral facts. Do you care? And if so, why do you care? Why would you want to follow whatever they were? Like, I want to act on my own goals and interests. Why would I act on like why would I conform to like some list out there of rules? Why? Like, I still don't understand why realists think that you like that it matters, or that they would. Why would they be interested, or would they not be interested? And then if they're not interested, why do they care? It's something very strange about it. I'd love to talk to more realists about this, like why they care. Sabir says video and audio quality are both quite crisp. I had a couple complaints on a couple videos. I think someone was complaining when my mouth was too close to the mic like this. Maybe that causes problems. I don't know. So Let Deer says the punishment if you don't follow the moral independent facts is that it will be detrimental to you. Like, you shouldn't cut your arm because if you do, you'll face pain and a disability. So the idea, did you have more to say? There's no more to the post. Also took you a while to type. No, there's like 50 posts after that. So to go back over that, the punishment if you don't follow the moral independent facts is that'll be detrimental to you. But it's not detrimental to you relative to your goals and values, or detrimental to you in some stance independent way. Because if it's detrimental to you in terms of your values, like, does that follow? Is that an entailment of realism? So let's say there's a stance independent moral fact that I shouldn't steal from somebody, but in the particular circumstances where I could steal and I want to steal, I know I could get away with it, and I do get away with it, and I don't feel guilt or remorse. What, in what way is it detrimental to me? I don't think it's an entailment of realism that if you violate the stance independent moral facts, it's detrimental to you. That would need to be disambiguated and clarified in what sense is it's supposed to be detrimental. And Yinsi says, can you elaborate on what a philosopher would mean if the semantic thesis isn't an empirical claim, like the meaning is just inbuilt into language or something? It's a little obscure. So there's a it's, I don't think philosophers are often super clear about what they think about the nature of language, but very roughly speaking, a lot of them, like the conventional views of language, are not language's use views like I have. So I think sentences mean what the people using them use them to mean. I don't think that sentences have some sort of intrinsic meaning, but it looks like a lot of philosophers do kind of see sentences that way. They think that there are facts about what words mean, and they think there's facts about what sentences mean, independent of their use in a particular context. That seems like a pretty common view. It seems the way that a lot of philosophers handle sentences. They will take some sentence, take it out of a context. They'll take a sentence like "the cat is on the mat," and they'll say, "What does the sentence mean?" I don't think I think that's nonsense. I don't think the sentence means anything. I don't think sentences could possibly have any meaning. And that some people react to, they balk at that. They'll recoil. That sounds insane. How could a sentence not have a meaning? Uh, so the cat is on the mat. Like, look, in any actual instance in which a person says the cat is on the mat, presumably the person's trying to say something. Well, what they mean is whatever it is they're trying to say. If that sounds trivial to you, great. That's all I'm saying. Like, the person could point at a cat and say the cat is on the mat. The person is probably saying something like a particular animal is like sitting or standing or is otherwise on top of some mat under like a normal earth gravity or something like that. They probably mean something, but they could mean anything. That could be a code word for, hey, the enemies are coming or something. So, it could mean anything in principle. And so what does it mean? Well, its meaning is its use in a particular context. But a lot of philosophers talk about sentences as though they have meanings independent of their usage in a particular context. Now, if you ask me what they mean, I don't know. That sounds like complete nonsense to me. To me, it's like describing actions independent of any particular person performing them and then asking what the intentions of the actions were. So like a person hits a person. Why did they hit the person? These are made up people. There's no context. There is no fact of the matter about what their intentions were, because that's not a real instance of a person hitting anybody. It's hypothetical. So when you take these decontextualized sentences, no one's using them. They couldn't have any meaning. You could ask about typical usage. You could say, what do people typically mean when they say, "Hey, I'm thirsty. I need a glass of water." Well, you would expect the person to like go get a cup and fill it with water and drink it. So like, what would people typically mean when they say that? Exactly what you would expect them. What everybody listening to this understands that what that would typically mean. But all that is some statistical fact about what people actually use it to mean in practice. It's not like it has a meaning independent of that. So it'd be the same thing like if a person hits another person. If I said, well, why would a person hit another person? Well, most of the time when a person hits another person, it's because they want to hurt them or cause them pain or whatever. But that doesn't guarantee that hitting is always like an aggressive act to cause another person pain. You could hit a person for some other reason in principle, or say cutting a person. Uh, so if I said, hey, a person cuts another person, do you think it's wrong? Well, in most cases, if a person's cutting another person, you might think, okay, well, they're hurting them on purpose, like they're robbing them and the person's resisting, so they're stabbing them. What about a surgeon with a scalpel? What if they're trying to help the person? Um, so it's really going to depend on the context. And I see language as a behavior, and it's just like hitting a person or cutting them with a knife, or patting them on the back or giving them a hug, positive or negative. That, and we have these typical associations. Not all that stuff is always positive or always negative. A person could hug a person in order to hold them in place so another person could stab them, or to administer a poison. It could be used for murder. So not every action that you would typically associate with positivity or negativity is always used that way. Why is it not always used that way? Because whether the action is positive or negative technically actually depends on its context. So just because you can extrapolate from typical cases to what's generally true of a particular action, usually hugs are positive, usually stabs or cuts with a knife are negative, doesn't mean they always are. These are statistical trends that we gather from our everyday experience. If everybody was doing surgeries all the time, we might, when I ask about knife cutting, you might think it's, oh yeah, it's surgeries. Of course, it's a good thing. So I see language as a behavior, just like all those things. And so what people mean is going to depend on the context of usage. It doesn't seem to me a lot of philosophers think that way. It seems like they have weird views about language. And it looks like a lot of 20th century philosophers had weird views about language. And if they were, the other thing is too, if they were interested in what people meant, why didn't they go out and ask people? Why were they sitting around in armchairs thinking about sentences? Why didn't they go talk to people? It's real weird. All right. Swag Master Doritos. Does the experimental philosophy that you know indicate the folk understandings of consciousness tend to lack ineffable, private, incorrigible aspects? As far as I know, yes, that is what. So I don't know if they specifically look at those properties, but what they try to look at is whether when you present uh, non-philosophers with various sorts of entities like robots and people and groups and stuff like that, will they attribute mental states in the same way as philosophers, operationalized in such a way where you would take the philosopher's attributions to indicate whether they think that the entity in question to which they're making the attributions has qualia or doesn't have qualia. And then they look at, do non-philosophers attribute things in the same way, to see if they share the same pattern as philosophers. And the answer is no. It doesn't look like they attribute things in the same pattern. And then you have to interpret that. Does that mean it's because they don't have a concept of qualia? It could be. It could also be that they're interpreting the questions differently than philosophers do. So it's an open question. If you take the studies at face value, they would appear to show that people don't have a sense of phenomenal states or qualia, which would indicate that they don't think that consciousness is characterized by ineffable, private, incorrigible property, like qualitative non-relational properties or something like that. But I don't accept the data at face value. It may be a little bit suggestive, but it's not definitive. And you say that would be surprising. Yeah, so you could look at let me pull up one of the studies. In fact, it's on my blog. Might as well promote my blog, but I have like a link where it'll have references. So let me pull that up, and then you could check that, and then you could look at the references and look directly at the papers yourself. Let me find that. Where is that? Here it is. Yep. So I'll throw that in the chat. It's called the folk philosophy fallacy. And let me see if I have the bibliography at the end. I do. Great. So let me throw one of the papers in there from that. Yeah, here's one of the central papers in the area back from 2009. It's called, for people listening, the title of the paper is How to Study Folk Intuitions About Phenomenal Consciousness. It's from Sitzman Mashri. It's from 2009, and it was published in Philosophical Psychology. They have a few other papers. They have a 2010 following up on this called Two Conceptions of Subjective Experience. Again, Sitzman Mashri, 2010 in Philosophical Studies. There's more. Check the link. So that'll be there for you to check. But yeah, that's what they're finding. And there's been follow-up studies that have found similar stuff. There's also been a couple of methodological, well, at least one methodological critique I know of, and it's pretty good methodological critique. So I don't think this evidence has like settled the matter. JPW says Sapir called out. Thank God I didn't say anything on Nathan's stream. Don't know if I could handle that kind of attack on how I spent my Friday. But yeah, but now you've outed yourself, so now I could call you out. What are you doing? Spending your Friday night listening to random people produce. I saw at the beginning of Nathan's stream, he's like, other people produce like high end content. Go check out Kane B's channel. He's just going to produce mid and low tier content. That's what I'm doing right now. Yeah, go check out. So Kane B has this awesome video. It's one of my favorite videos he's done on begging the question. And yeah, these standard characterizations of begging the question. It's like I'm tempted to either say, yeah, technically nothing is really a deductive argument, properly speaking, or another way you could put it is that question begging, all deductive arguments are question begging. So, you know, I basically think that there are very serious problems in logic about like the vacuity of it. Now, FCS Schiller, the pragmatist that everybody seems to have forgotten about and never writes about, has a couple books on this where he goes into these problems. Let me pull up one of these to share with you. I mean, good luck finding them, but I'll pull them up anyway. So here is one of them. I'll throw this in the chat. You could check it out. So it's called, I really like it, Formal Logic, a Scientific and Social Problem. And he's very critical of the misuse and of the way philosophers have employed logic in their arguments. This isn't to say that he's against logic, but he has another book called Logic for Use. But he's against the way that a lot of philosophers employ it, and he makes some similar remarks that are similar in some ways, reminiscent in some ways of what Kane B talks about in that video. So maybe Schiller is somebody that Kane B should check out. Anyway, yeah, Nathan and I were producing the mid-tier content. Okay. Pierce says, if you're familiar with the nuances, would you mind attempting to explain some general similarities and differences between quietism and eliminativism? About what though? Like eliminativism in consciousness? Oh no, I'm getting like a really stuffy nose suddenly. It would depend on the context. I mean, I'm not like super familiar with quietist literature. Like I just started calling myself a quietist pretty recently. If you're so a lot of eliminativists in philosophy of mind are going to say that like certain types of folk terminology, like folk psychological states that are picked out by like stuff like belief, and I don't know, maybe emotional states, certain sorts of mental state attributions, that they're not really referring to anything that really exists, that it doesn't really map on to the actual underlying way that the world is. How does that differ from quietism? I take quietism to be more inward looking and looking more at the way that philosophers frame and describe things and saying, hey, once you disentangle what philosophers are up to, there are sorts of questions that they pose dissolve. Whereas you could say in a certain sense, eliminativism is more outward looking. It's more a thesis about what's going on outside of philosophy. And hey, this stuff going on outside of philosophy, that's all fundamentally misguided. There's nothing like that. That's not what reality is really like. Now, if you take like a Wittgenstein language game approach, eliminativism maybe doesn't look so attractive anymore. It might be that language is legitimate and does the work it needs to do in those contexts, and then the technical stuff does the work it needs to do and is legitimate in its appropriate context of usage. And that's probably more the direction I would go in. So, I wouldn't typically think of myself as an eliminativist, largely for reasons like that. I like a Swagmaster Doritos says quietism is eliminativism on steroids. And Yinzi says, who are your favorite philosophers? A big influence on me is Michael Gill, but I've only read 2 or 3 papers from him, so I don't have a good sense of his overall philosophical outlook. But those papers had a absolutely huge influence, so I'll put him on the list. Dan Dennett had a massive influence on me, so got to give him credit. His stuff on consciousness, I think, is especially great. I disagree with him on most other stuff, but consciousness, I like what he has to say. I really like Stephen Stitch's work. That's also had a huge influence on me. He's been big behind experimental philosophy, and just generally, I like a lot of the stuff he's done. I haven't dug. I've mostly discussed rather than read extensively FCS Schiller, but from what I see from Schiller and William James, that's the direction I'm moving in currently. So I'll mention them as big influences. And less so influences that shape the way I'm thinking over the year, but more like the way I ended up thinking. I'm finding more and more resonances with them the more I understand their views. So pragmatism is something I'm discovering sort of later in life. Is like, oh, I guess I was a sort of a inchoate pragmatist all along. And so the more I see from them, the more I'm like, yeah, that's already how I saw things. That's really cool. Um, and I especially resonate with pretty much everything I've seen from Schiller so far, but less familiar with them. Who else? A lot of people in experimental philosophy. So Stephen Stitch, but also Edward Mashery has done some really great work. Pretty much everything he writes, I've read. I like. He's all over the place. He's actually in the consciousness studies that I just mentioned. Stitch and Mashery have also written some really cool stuff on morality. So Mashery has this great article on morality as a historical invention. I really love that paper. It's a nice, short, crisp paper. It's really cool. Stitch has cool papers on like delineating the moral domain, distinguishing moral from non-moral norms, that kind of stuff. Who else? Probably there's other people I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. Walter Sennett Armstrong has some cool papers. Sharon Street has a couple really cool papers. I like her paper on what I ideally what is they're called ICEs, I think. I'm brain farting again. I guess because I'm on here late and tired. Ideally coherent eccentrics. I remembered before I finished looking it up. That paper is really cool, dealing with Derek Parfit on future Tuesday indifference. Really cool paper, and I think maybe she's most known for her paper on a Darwinian dilemma. Like it's a big paper that I think sparked a lot of the discussion on evolutionary debunking arguments. So her work is really cool, and I like her writing. It's always I like her examples. It's good stuff. Who else? Who else? That's it off the top of my head. For I guess more contemporary philosophers. As far as philosophers that had an influence on me in the past, my first philosophy essay was on Nietzsche. I was assigned to write on his idea, the Übermensch. So I really like Nietzsche stuff. I still like it. I think he's a fun read. I like how much he differs from the people around him. I often like countercultural people. I know a lot of people will appeal to Nietzsche as this like teenage angsty meme, and I don't like that framing. I think that he was a serious thinker who's worth taking seriously. Maybe he wasn't serious about everything. Maybe there's a lot of irony and jokes and goofy remarks in his work, but I think he has a worldview that's worth looking at to maybe get some insights from, even if you don't ultimately agree with it. Um, Wittgenstein. So Wittgenstein is tough to read, um, but like his influence is everywhere. So hard to say he's a favorite philosopher. I don't want to say someone's a favorite philosopher if I haven't really read much of their work. Um, so who else? I'm thinking. I always like David Hume. David Hume is cool. This maybe is an unusual one, but another paper I wrote as an undergrad was on Epicurus, and I found the Epicurean view of things really appealing. I don't know why Stoicism got so popular in recent times. I think the Epicurean view is a really cool view. So I really liked Epicurus, had a good vibe. So as far as like older philosophers, I'm down with some Epicurus. There's probably others I just can't remember right now. And Yenji says, "Did you do the AMA yet?" No, I'm not going to do it until after Christmas, probably after New Year's. So sometime in January. Question Quander says, Percy and abduction is the only way I know how to think. I also think it's the only way other people know how to think. Evidence is still coming in on that count, though. If you're making an empirical claim that you think human psychology or human cognition generally comports with a kind of pragmatist view, I agree. So I actually think, people often see pragmatism as this like totally bizarre, like, this is a weird view of truth. It's everything about it is weird and bizarre, and it's not how people normally think. Totally disagree. I actually think it's philosophers, like non-pragmatic philosophers, that have developed really idiosyncratic, weird, and often kind of anti-human ways of thinking. They think in a way that I think is very alien and strange. And Yin says, I just intuit the answers to philosophical questions, just like I intuit the moral facts. Yeah, well, that's how a lot of philosophers approach philosophy. They just intuit everything. Yeah, this is getting to stuff I said a while ago. Wow, this is a totally wild amount of comments. I think am I finally catching up? 9:48. I'm still 25 minutes behind. Holy crap. Okay. I think pareidolia and epiphania are the reason for many religions. I think that might. Oh, sorry, I was reading. Carlos says this. I think pareidolia and epiphania are the reason for many religions. Might be place maybe some role. Probably other stuff going on there too. All right. Han Fei says, I care because I have to look at myself in the mirror. If you're referencing complying with the stance independent moral facts, well, if the stance independent moral facts were stuff like torture people, rip people's eyes out, set people on fire, steal from people, yeah, the only way I could look at myself in the mirror is if I didn't comply with those facts. So, what do I use as the arbiter of whether I'm going to comply with the stance independent moral facts? My subjective moral values. So, if I was all about eye gouging and the moral facts said eye gouge, I'd be like, hell yeah. But if it said eye gouge and I'm against it, hell no. So, yeah, look yourself in the mirror. Why would I have any problems refusing to comply with moral values, like moral rules that didn't comport with the values I already had? Why would you? Letter says I might talk about moral realism. Derek McAllister says it's almost like why care about the physical facts? Well, unfortunately, I'm not a physicalist, so I don't think there are physical facts. I mean, depending on what you mean by that. What are some of your weirdest takes in social science? You're a maverick metaethicist. Are you as spicy in psychology? Um, hmm. It's the kind of thing where I'd want to have to go and sit down and look at like the data out there. Um, to really tell you. I'm very much in the camp of thinking that the replication crisis in psychology. So this is basically the issue that we basically started to find out many studies in psychology don't replicate. This is true of social psychology, but other areas outside of social psychology, probably in the social sciences more broadly. I'm very much of the opinion that that is a much more serious problem than anybody has ever really fully appreciated, and that it hasn't really been solved. So this started to become really an issue about 15 years ago. It was around 2011, um, when a variety of high-profile studies, including one that purported to show evidence of like a paranormal power, like ESP. Was it ESP? I think so. Yeah, uh, a precognition. I guess it's a type of ESP. Whatever. Basically, that people had some sort of paranormal abilities. So that and a few other high-profile studies uh, prompted people to go, whoa, there's some serious problems going on here. Now, a lot of the major problems with replication crisis are that studies don't replicate, meaning if someone attempts to conduct a study as close as possible to the original, they don't tend to get statistically significant findings in the same direction as the original study. Even when they do, they often get much smaller effect sizes. Basically, like the strength of the effect is a lot lower than people initially anticipated in the follow-up studies. Follow-up studies aren't always correct. Just because a study fails to replicate, well, maybe that's the new study that has a problem, not the old study. Maybe no studies have a problem. Uh, maybe the new study is a false positive or something. Who knows? Um, and it could be that there's deviations from the original design that account for the differences. So people have this bias sometimes of thinking the study that comes later is like necessarily better. It's not, or at least just assuming it's probably better. It isn't always better. Anyway, so a lot of the problems have to do with the way that people go about analyzing and reporting data. I'm not going to get into all the details there, but there's a variety of other issues that don't get as much attention, like measurement problems, theory problems. There's like papers on like the measurement crisis, the theory crisis. There is a sort of uh, there's a sort of onion of problems, and the one that received 97% of the media attention and discussion is stuff related to data analysis and p-values. I guess some of it is also like another problem is like data fraud and fabrication and that kind of thing. So those are the two that have received the most attention. But there's these deeper problems. So I guess maybe one of my spicy takes is that I think that if most research doesn't replicate, I think even of the research that does replicate, a lot of it is so fundamentally misguided in terms of like the measures are invalid even if it replicates. There's not any, it doesn't fit into any intelligible or well formulated theoretical foundations. I think basically most findings are probably I don't know a good way to put it. Like, not because I want to say something really harsh, but because it's just hard to articulate. Uh, if you have this isolated finding that doesn't comport with any particular theory, there's not a whole lot you could do with it in terms of fitting it into a model and making broader predictions to understand the way that the world works. Everything is fragmented and isolated, and our measures are just not very good. So basically, I think that the problems in psychology, and again, this may or may not generalize to other social sciences, are extremely deep. They're really serious, and we're really just not doing anywhere near enough to work on them. As far as actual findings in the field, I don't know. I don't think so. I tend to go with what the current evidence on things tends to show. I think it points in the direction that we have pretty serious issues. So as far as someone might say, "Hey, I think this is true" instead of that, and that might be a spicy view. But because I think we can't really trust a lot of the measures and findings, there's not a whole lot that I'm going to be like, "I think this is true" instead of that, and then someone could go, "Whoa, that's a controversial position." So I don't really think so. Reflective Journey says, so the sentence that no sentences have meaning has no meaning. Well, technically, yeah, the sentence that has no meaning. Derek McAllister says, "Are you familiar with the Bubakiki study?" Yes, I am. So Bubakiki, basically, you show people shapes. Like you show one where it's like very rounded, and sort of soft looking, kind of bulbous, and then you show another one that's like a little spiky, it looks like a little porcupine, and you ask people. In fact, I could do this in the audience. Yeah, let's do it. Why not? So let's say we have a round object, a very round object, and we have a very sharp object. Let's do the survey. I don't remember if it's a boba or a kiki. We'll say which is the kiki. The soft rounded object or the sharp spiky one. Okay. Okay, one moment. So just go on your gut instinct. What feels right in this case? Is it? Well, let me look it up just so I spell it right. Oh, it is boba. Okay, cool. We'll start the poll. We'll see what everybody says. Okay. And Yinzi says, "Do you have any pets, Lance? You strike me as a cat person." Ooh, we'll do a survey on that before I answer that. And some people might know the answer. You're welcome to vote anyway. I don't care. So we'll do Booba and Kiki. Um, and then why is that there? We'll get to that afterwards. All right. Oh, I pinned the wrong question. Okay. Only got 8 votes, 9 votes. Come on, vote, 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 vote. We got 27 people in here. We should get more votes. Alrighty, and I'll continue for now. So we'll do that one, then I'll address the pet one. Wow, I've done an hour and 14, and it's just been comments. You all are really awesome. Reflective Journey says, meaning as use still needs normative boundaries. Rule following considerations. Otherwise, no one could be wrong about any claim they make. I don't know quite what you mean. Um, I don't know if that's supposed to be an issue for meaning as use views or not. Modern moralist says, I'm voting L's a dog person. He's Michael Gill's bulldog. I don't, I don't think of myself that much in that way. I think our approach to things is probably quite a bit different. All right. Modern moralist. What are we drinking tonight? I have water. Nothing special. Oh, someone actually asked about this. and this is, but I already answered the question. So and he says, Lance, what do you make of the replication crisis in psychology? It's really bad. Plus all the apparent fraud going on. Also really bad. I saw some videos you did on this. Would you say most psychological research is pretty bad? I don't think psychological research is bad. I think that there is a general inattention to a lot of the methodological problems. I think basically psychological research is really difficult, and that researchers haven't really stepped up and developed the institution's norms, training, and practices to address just how difficult it actually is. I mean, certainly there's some bad research, especially fraudulent research, if you could even call it that, is bad. And people sometimes there's papers that are just bad, like I'm like, oh, these researchers really made big mistakes. But usually that's not the issue. Even if you find mistakes in papers, even pretty serious ones, um, it's hard to say. I don't know how much I would say is bad research and how much is just the field just hasn't really refined itself to the point where I think it needs to be. And yeah, maybe I have very high standards or something. But Spears drinking a Yingling. Modern moralist. It looks like some kind of cocktail it's like a cocktail emoji. I don't know what that is. Brett C says, assuming moral realism. Oh, this is what I'm doing again, where I start reading a message before I actually read the message in the chat first. Let's see. I hope you don't say something terrible, Brett. Okay. Assuming moral realism, why would following the moral facts be any less unexplainable than a scientist following the stance independent scientific reasoning, even if they come in conflict with their goals? Why would following the moral facts be any less unexplainable? Well, what do you mean unexplainable? I'm asking what would motivate a person to comply with moral facts, like why they would care to follow them. You say then following stance independent scientific reasoning, even if they come in conflict with their goals. So that I see that's an interesting question. So in terms of the scientific facts, like a person could just acknowledge that they're true, and that's good enough for them. But in terms of actually putting scientific facts to use, they make practical, predictable. They have implications for the world. So, scientific facts about chemistry or physics impact what kind of technologies we devise, what kind of medications we devise, what sort of substances that like materials engineers are going to put together, how we build rockets, how we build cars. So they have practical consequences. So that's why people may care about I would just say in some cases people may not care about particular scientific facts. But to the extent that people care, they might care because they're curious to know, but they might also care because of the practical consequences. And also, a lot of the scientific facts are into. I mean, actually, I think probably all of them. Maybe not all of them. Uh, they're all integrated together into a broad and cohesive picture of reality. So, knowledge in one domain or one body of scientific facts may be relevant um, to other areas of science. So there's a certain kind of convergence or consilience in one's knowledge in this or that domain, and so it may be relevant to the extent that it may be relevant to some other thing you do care about. So a lot of it is all going to be deeply embedded in and intertwined in other considerations you care about. So people like basically, it's not that I think that we just do science and then we may or may not care about the results. People are doing science because they care about it. So the causality here is reversed. It's not like, we happen to know these scientific facts. Now, are they useful or not? Why would we follow these scientific facts? It's more that our pursuit of the discovery of these facts is already driven by our goals and interests in the first place. Whereas, maybe someone might want to know the stance independent moral facts for what? Curiosity? Okay, now you know what they are. Curiosity satisfied. But why would you follow the facts? If you want to follow facts about the periodic table, okay, well, what will happen if you choose not to? There's consequences. And that's exactly the issue. Refusing to follow established scientific facts has consequences. Refusing to follow the stance independent moral facts doesn't. And that's, I mean, when you set the two side by side, I actually think it actually highlights the difference between the two, how different they are. Like science is just by its very nature, the kinds of differences are relevant. They're cashed out in terms of our predictions and expectations. Whereas morality on the non-naturalist view is completely unlike that. I still can't remember if it's is it Jit? Stanfield says, "Hey Lance, glad you're streaming." Yeah, I'm glad I'm streaming. Having fun here, even though I'm just drinking boring water and my nose is getting increasingly stuffy. That's not good. All right, I can barely breathe. I'm breathing into my mouth right now. Brett C says, "I'd imagine traits like integrity and humility could explain following both moral and scientific facts fairly equally. Why? Why would you have more integrity and humility if you follow the moral facts?" Keep asking engaging questions, chat. We can't let them catch up and win. Oh yeah, I guess that'll be the goal here. My goal here is to catch up to where chat is. So if there's more questions, then I'm never going to catch up. Um, St- Stanfield. I'm going to go with your last name. I always forget. I'm so sorry. I'm so terrible at names. The more we let's try to recite or refer to how people feel. And I'm sorry, I forget too. My brain is full of Swiss cheese. I don't know what's going on. If moral realists try to recite or refer to how people feel, oh, it's a question. As an empirical point, when it comes to moral realism being true, will this perception give more weight to moral realism? Okay, let me reread it. They try to recite or refer to how people feel as an empirical point. Will this give more weight to moral realism? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Reflective Journey says, I don't know what this is in reference to, but we'll see. This is a strange way to put it. Moral realists don't have a subjective preference beforehand any more than a scientist has a preference for water being a substance before doing the experiment. It's not. I'm not talking about a preference for what the stance independent moral facts turn out to be. I'm talking about preferences for what you want the world to be like. So, let's say you're a moral realist, and it turns out you become an anti-realist. You're convinced, oh, after all, there's no stance independent moral facts. Are you now okay? You have with like people just murdering your family or like torturing you? I wouldn't be. And so, for moral realists, the question you could ask is, what would you do if there were no stance independent moral facts? And for me, the answer is I do exactly what I'm currently doing. It make no difference to me one way or another. If a moral realist actions would change, I'd wonder how would they change and why? Like I'm still going to act on my values regardless. All right, let's end this poll on Boba and Kiki. We got soft Boba, sharp Kiki is, let's see. Can I put these up on the screen? Is that possible? I don't see it. Oh well. So the poll's over. Here it is. I don't see a way to put that on the screen. Anyway, so we got 16 votes. Bobo won with 93%. This is based on is it supposed to be some type of, I don't actually know what it's based on, the phenomena that it's based on. Let's see what it says here. Non-arbitrary mental association between certain speech sounds and certain visual shapes. I mean, could it be a type of low-level synesthesia? I don't know. But basically, a lot of people, they associate like softness with buh 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 kind of sounds and sharpness with a k k k. And so there seems to be an association between shapes and maybe textures or feelings and like the way things feel. I don't mean emotions and sounds like k, like sa. Maybe that seems sharper, and then buh and guh that seems rounder. I'm assuming that Derek could ask that because it might be related to the apophenia stuff. Question Quander, real question, as opposed to a fake question. If you aren't a physicalist, is whatever you hold ontologically isomorphic to naive physicalism or materialism? How could I tell a difference from what you would predict for as physics? Good question. Yeah, probably. It's probably going to be pretty similar. And I'm not sure you could tell a difference. You don't have to commit to an ontological view while rejecting physicalism. Yeah, that's true. I can accept predictions about physical constants or the physical world we inhabit without having a position. Right. So basically, I'm going to accept what physics has to say for the most part, at least provisionally, even if I don't accept any particular metaphysical uh, implications of that. As people talking to each other. Zachman says, "What do you think about relativism about truth?" Depends what you mean by relativism. So if you mean something like truth is determined by like whatever you prefer to be the truth. I'm not going to go in for that. But pragmatism does include a fundamentally perspectival element where truth for a pragmatist can change over time. So my views at a given point in time could be true, and then I learn new things, and then I those original views I held are now false, and I have new beliefs, and those beliefs are true. And that does not mean that I thought the original views were true, but then I found out they were false, and now I have new beliefs that I think are true. No, they were literally true. They became false. And then now my new beliefs are true. And that sounds really ridiculous to people. I think it might be one of the hardest pills for people to swallow for pragmatism, and many of them won't swallow it. Like it just sounds too ridiculous. That for pragmatism, truth is a moving target. It actually changes. So it changes in part with certain considerations that are distinctive to the individual or to the community. Um, so uh, in that sense, there's a somewhat relativistic element to pragmatism, but pragmatism is still gonna your beliefs are still getting checked against the world around you. So it's not like it's just I don't think anybody just if I prefer something is true, then it is true. I don't think it works quite so simply as that, at least not in a very crude way. So what do I think about relativism about truth? Any sort of crude form of relativism, I think is going to be pretty silly and not workable on pragmatic grounds. So but as far as a perspectival aspect of truth, absolutely. I mean, truth is the output or the end result of a process of inquiry. It's not some special metaphysical status that I think um, applies to certainly not propositions, but certain sorts of facts. I don't think that there are truths floating out there. I think truth is there's a somewhat constructive element to truth. All right. Oh, people talking to each other. Modern Moralist says Kiki was my stage name. Okay. Okay, more people talking to each other. Analytic philosophy asks, do you think weird that says Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic populations contributes to the replication problem in some sense? So weird is an acronym that was introduced by Henrik Hein and Norn Zion in a 2010 paper. I think it was in Brain and Behavioral Sciences, where they said, hey, the vast majority of psychological research has been conducted on populations that are predominantly from Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic nations like the United States, Canada, Australia, basically predominantly the anglophone and like western european, I guess european world. And other countries to varying degrees are going to be more or less weird, and that could be with respect to any one of the components of these dimensions or more generally with respect to all of them. But the vast majority of research has been conducted among weird populations, and in particular, largely on psychology students and students more generally at universities. So it is highly unrepresentative. Do I think that's contributing to the replication crisis? No, not really. I don't think that's a big factor here. Um, so the replication crisis has to do with other sorts of issues than the populate because you know you're if you're running a bunch of studies on people from weird populations and then you're replicating them or attempting to replicate them in people from weird populations, as long as even if that population isn't representative of people in general, the original study and the new study should both be sampling from the same population. So no, I don't really think this is a big problem for the replication crisis. It's a problem for the generalizability of findings where that's relevant. It often is quite relevant, but that's a separate issue. It's another big issue. Just put it on the pile, add it to the onion. Jimothy asks, yeah, so I don't know much about that. So we'll just have to have a conversation about it. So we'll skip that for now. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm happy to try to talk about it and understand it better. Han Fei says, looking yourself in the mirror equals rational scrutiny. Moral values survive rational scrutiny, and perhaps they are the values that come out of rational scrutiny or reflection. I mean, it might depend on what you mean by rational scrutiny or reflection. So if I engage in rational scrutiny and I discover that there are these stance independent moral facts like you ought to X and you should Y, again, I'm going to ask myself another question, which is, do I care about Xing? Do I care about Ying? And if my answers deviate from whatever the stance independent moral facts recommend, I have absolutely no interest in complying them with them, and I wouldn't feel any guilt at all because I don't have any antecedent desire, goal, or commitment or value. Like I don't value complying with moral facts. I value my values, and I don't. Those values don't include comply with the moral facts. So why would I have any interest in complying with them for their own sake? Reflective Journey says, I meant the fact value distinction collapses if you have pragmatist commitments. Putnam is pretty good at that. It doesn't mean that the same, just not completely separate. Yeah, there's going to be some convergence there or overlap. Okay. Okay, that's evil. Everybody argues about that. When Lance says brain is full of Swiss cheese, I'm just very forgetful and scatterbrained, and I forget a lot of stuff. What the hell? I said forgetful and I forget a lot of stuff. See? Swiss cheese. Greg John says, if reasons exist and senses do not exist, then moral realism is true. How do you rebut the realist argument of eliminativism? Do you have an account of personal identity? No, I'd be a quietist about personal identity too. Operationalize what you mean by personal identity. What do you mean? Disambiguate. I should say disambiguate. Disambiguate what you mean, and there's going to be some answer to whether you have that kind of identity or not. Some of it may turn on empirical questions, some may not. So yeah, quietist about identity. I don't understand this first question. If reasons exist and stances do not exist, then moral realism is true. So that seems to be a statement. Be a little weird for, I don't know what it would mean for reasons to exist. And I also don't want to, why I would think stances don't exist. How do you rebut the realist argument of eliminativism? I don't know what that argument is. Normal Guy says, hello, Lance, could you please explain what qualia quietism is? Well, first I would say check out Pete Mandick's paper. Pete has a paper on qualia quietism, but roughly it's the view that there is a certain type of discourse of a sort of cluster of technical terms that are used among academic philosophers, terms like what it's like, qualia, and phenomenal states and phenomenal consciousness. And this language is used in a way that is inconsistent, underdeveloped, unclear, vague, ambiguous, or incommunicable in or mutually interdefining in ways that are vacuous and have few or no connections to other terminology that we could grasp onto. And that collectively, what this I think suggests is that this language isn't really doing anything. It doesn't mean anything. And that nothing really meaningfully can be said about it. That's what I take qualia quietism to be. All right, give me a second. I need a drink. An hour and a half, and I still haven't caught up to the comments. This is insane. All right, Derek says it was on the topic of language games and whether certain claims have inherent meaning based on the words used. I must have lost track of what that was in a reference to. Oh well, starting to lose track. Getting too tired here. Sapir says anti-realist question: how do you get the Swiss cheese? Okay, you're being silly. Marcus Seneca says, why not hold about moral propositions whatever you hold about mathematical propositions and epistemic propositions? Pretty much do. I'm a global normative anti-realist. So I'm an anti-realist about epistemic normativity. I think of mathematics as a useful game. So I'm not like a Platonist or something about mathematics. It'd be something closer to a nominalist. So I pretty much do have a similar view on all those things. Marcus Seneca says that says some are objectively true and true by virtue of concepts meaning within the proposition. What? So I wouldn't think that about it's really going to depend on what you mean by that. So with mathematics, just yeah, as long as you stipulate what you mean, or as long as you say, "Hey, I'm stipulating these axioms," then you could do mathematics after that. But like I don't see it as fundamentally different from like the rules of chess. Like, hey, I stipulate these are the rules of the game. We're going to call that chess, and then a bunch of facts follow from, hey, if you do this with a rook and you do that with a knight or a bishop or whatever, um, in how many moves would you be able to get a checkmate? There's going to be some fact of the matter about that, but it's still going to be contingent on whatever your starting rules are. And I just see math as the same way. Math is the maths we use are the surviving useful types of math, or the ones people find interesting. Barney Mayerson says, I consider myself a pragmatist, but I'm a deflationist about truth. That's interesting because pragmatism often centers on a view about truth that's not deflationary. So, okay. Greg John says, how did your conversation with Synth go and why isn't, what? I don't remember having a conversation with Synth. Um, why? What? Yeah, I don't remember that. Did I have a conversation? Okay. Don't you think? Don't know what that's about. I think I'm getting too tired to do these. Yeah, give me a second. I'm gonna need a break. Actually, I'll be back in a couple minutes. I'm gonna take a few minutes break. Give me a minute. Okay, I'm back. All right, let's keep going. My brain is short circuiting. Let's see how long it keeps working. Uh, Stuart Kendall says, please give me Lancelot. No. Marcus Seneca says, how could truth be dependent on constructed inquiry if there's already an objective truth in this set? I mean, the question is helping itself to an assumption that a person may or may not grant. Um, but I mean, roughly for a pragmatist, that I mean, you're already setting things up in an odd way, but uh, for a pragmatist, the way that they're going to look at it is that a person we could imagine some person in some historical context in which they have an approach or conception of the world that does what it needs to do, works for them, and you could say that it's insofar as and to the extent that it does what it needs to do and allows them to make useful predictions and navigate the world, you would say that's true. And it might be one consequence of that system may hold one view or another about the number of stars. It could be a particular model that holds that the number of stars is odd, and then it could turn out that there's some changes downstream of that, and now they adopt some new perspective. That perspective becomes true, and then the number of stars is even or something like that. So I know that's a very rough sketch, but the particular like way you're framing or setting this up looks like it's like, hey, there's some sort of correspondence fact here, and pragmatism would deny that, and so it's wrong. And so I think it might be helping itself to an assumption or framing itself in a way that implies something that would make pragmatism look weird. But I don't think pragmatism is really going to have a big problem with that. All right. So yeah, so you say, but the truth of that statement, which one it is already there, whether or not we ever discover it. So I just would deny that. I don't think that's how truth works. Yeah, more stuff I'm not going to get into. His down materials. Any thoughts on political philosophy, particularly from an ethical angle? Oh, well, you're talking more in terms of more abstract stuff. I don't like to get into politics, but if it's like really, really abstract politics, um, so if any had significant influence on your own politics, uh, no, not really. Uh, I made it. It's not something I really discuss. So sorry, it's just not. It's not a topic that I get into. Uh, what can I say? I'm trying to think if there's anything that I think it would be reasonable for me to say about this. I'm gonna take a pretty similar view to this as I would about a lot of other things that would be very unsurprising, which is that I don't really think since I don't think there's any stance independent facts about like morality. I'm also not going to think that there's any sort of special normative facts. Like I don't think that there's a fact of the matter about whether the state is legitimate or something like that. I think that these are questions to navigate for social and practical reasons, not because we want to figure out what the facts are. So that's going to have implications on how I would address these questions. But these are just not questions I do much thinking, writing, or discussing anymore at all. I've kind of just retired from thinking about any of this stuff. So not much more I could say about it than that. I mean, there is, but it's just maybe I just don't want to. Reflective Journey says, yeah, truth is a moving target, so are values. So I'd probably agree with that. So the facts discourse is dialectically mediated by values and vice versa. Doesn't this collapse the whole sharp, real, anti-real? It is all construction. Yeah, in a certain sense. I would prefer to just be a straight up quietist and just say, yeah, the realism anti realism distinction is just a bunch of baloney and we should drop it. But I position myself as an anti realist within that discourse and as a quietist in a certain way within and outside of the discourse because I want to make clear what it is I think is a more serious problem, which is realism. I don't like, if you're not, is the anti-realist positions within that framework I reject because they buy into too many of the assumptions that realists buy into, and so I have a problem with all the existing anti-realist positions too, and I prefer to throw the whole thing out. But I think realism is the bigger boogeyman of the two, and so I position myself as in opposition to it. All right. This is nonsense, but I feel like reading it. Question quanderer. Fake question. Do questions question themselves into existence in order to be quandered? Yes, they do. All right, people talking to each other. Sapir says we're winning. Chat, keep it up. Greg John says the moral realist argument from eliminativism is just that if there is no self, there are no stances. If there are no stances, then there are only stance independent reasons. That's interesting. That is interesting. Um, yeah, I think I would just deny that you need selves to have stances, or at least some robust metaphysical conception of a self. Greg, I can't think of any argument for the existence of the self that doesn't beg the question. I just don't see an issue with talking about selves without having deep like I think I like it depends what you mean by self or personal identity. Like I exist, like Lance is real. Uh um and so I think there'd be some way of cashing that out. And I have stances and I have beliefs and I have attitudes. All right, some of these remarks are getting increasingly silly. Marcus says, pre-theoretically, we already know that exactly one element in that set is true. It seems a reason for reductio for the pragmatist. I don't know what the reductio is supposed to be. Marcus Seneca says, I feel you're taking this flawed approach to philosophy and answering objections. Well, I can deny one of your premises. I don't have to listen to you. No, 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 no. What exactly is the problem? So if you present a premise, am I obligated to accept it? Like what I could, yeah, what is the problem with doing this? Yeah, I can reject your premises. Too bad if you don't like it. If there's any problem at all with that, you're welcome to articulate what you think that problem is. So, if you disagree, I'm happy to present arguments like this. If banana, I'm correct. Banana, so I'm correct. So, what are you going to do? Just deny the premises? Which premise you want to deny? Like, people could toss around syllogisms all they want. I have no obligation to accept them. Greg, John, thoughts on the work of Derek Parfit, especially Reasons and Persons? Weird and unimpressive. Just I've never found anything especially compelling about Parfit's work. A lot of people hail that as some sort of brilliant masterpiece. I don't like Parfit's writing. I don't like Parfit's arguments. I don't like. There's nothing about Parfit that I find impressive. I don't like. It seems like he was a really nice and interesting and thoughtful person. But as far as his philosophy goes, it seems as just absolute like Future Tuesday argument. Don't buy it. Like his stuff on personal identity is cool and pretty interesting, but I don't know that there's anything genuinely groundbreaking about it. Like I don't didn't Buddhists have stuff like this a long time before? Didn't Hume have views on personal identity that were pretty skeptical and blew apart a lot of or at least purport to a lot of more robust conceptions of it? I don't did Parfit contribute anything especially original to that? Jimothy, favorite movie? That's a tough one. I did see the trailer for 28 Years Later, and that looked pretty awesome. I really liked 28 Days Later. I thought that was a great movie. 28 Weeks Later, was it that second one? I think people thought it was okay. Yeah, I didn't like it very much. Wouldn't say it's my favorite movie though. 28 Days Later. Um, it's my favorite. I don't know if I have a favorite movie. Um, I like a lot of the Tarantino movies. I like horror movies, science fiction. I really like the Truman Show, so that's a good one. Um, yeah, I don't have a bunch of views on movies. Trying to think. I like original Alien movies. I actually like the Predator movie. I thought Predator is cool. But again, I wouldn't pick it as a favorite movie. Oh, what's one of my favorite movies? I'll tell you my favorite TV show is Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I think that's the best television series that's ever been made. Like and I'm including live action. I think it's better than those. Um, really hated the last few seasons of Game of Thrones. I thought that went down the shitter. I think that got bad in season 5. I actually stopped watching a lot of the episodes in season 5. Um, a lot of people like it deviates from the books. Deviates. I don't care if something is the same as the books. I care if it's good. And I didn't think it was good. I thought the Dorn plot with Jamie and Braun was just garbage. It's not in the books, but it's also just bad. I didn't like them cutting out characters like John Connington and some others in the books. Young Griff, that I thought were cool and interesting that were introduced later. I mean, the books kind of get a little bananas with the amount of characters they have, but it's not about deviating from the books. I just didn't like what they ended up doing with the story and the dialogue and everything. Ugh. So, see, here I go talking about what's bad, not about what's good. I like Breaking Bad. I don't know why people think it's so extraordinary. I thought it was good, but yeah, it's good, but not mind blowing. Again, I'm talking about TV shows, movies. If someone reminded me of the movies I like, then I go, oh yeah, I like that one. But nothing's coming to my mind right away. If you throw some movies in there, I'll tell you whether I've seen them and if so, whether I like them or not. Marcus Seneca says, as Keith Frankish said, unless you buy into a foundationalist epistemology, deductive arguments are just window dressing. Yeah, they're just window dressing. I don't know where that quote came from, but I like it. Cool quote. Marcus says you should take all arguments as fodder for reflective equilibrium rather than taking a reason to reject one premise of a major argument to be a reason not to take the whole thing seriously. I'm not really sure what you're getting at there. I don't take, if I reject a premise of an argument, that doesn't mean I don't take the argument seriously. It's really going to depend a lot on what you mean by take it seriously. So if someone says, presents an argument to me and I reject a premise, I'm often going to be able to say more than just I reject. Like I don't just unreflectively reject things. I might ask, why should I accept the premise if I don't already accept it? A lot of my questions are going to be about what the person means, and I'm going to ask them to clarify. They clarify, then I may ask, okay, so why should I think that? And often, what I get is something like, because my intuitions. Okay, well, if I don't have their intuitions, what do you want me to do? So if someone says, well, the reason I accept this premise is because of my intuitions, it's intuitive. If I don't share the intuition, what do you want me to do? And if they have some argument for it, I'm happy to entertain the argument. But that argument might bottom out and appeal to some premise that relies on their intuitions. And then what am I supposed to do? So no, I don't think I'm doing anything inappropriate in rejecting premises of arguments. If you're free to do so. And if the assumption is that there's something psychologically suspicious going on, like in the background, what? I mean, you tell me what you think I'm doing wrong. Yeah, so Nietzsche I really like. Not something I could get a whole lot into now, but from what I've seen from Nietzsche, I think he's a deeper thinker than he's often given credit for. I think people are he's like weirdly treated as having these like super edgy views, but um, I see Nietzsche as having a lot of insight into the way um, advances in like some like social changes, scientific advances had really knocked out the pegs that were holding up a lot of the social structure that was supporting Western society, and I think he was anticipating rather large social ramifications of that. And I think he was right. I think he's very prescient, and a lot of his insights just seem like maybe it's a matter of like seeing what I want to see there, but a lot of it just seems very insightful. Now, someone being insightful, okay, someone could be prescient, but if they predict the things in the future, but they don't have an interesting philosophical perspective, who cares? Okay, so they're prescient, they were insightful. But his vision of what the world could be like. I mean, maybe there's some ugly and questionable elements of it. I mean, probably there are, but I do think that he was putting his finger on a kind of watering down and homogenization of the human spirit, this malaise that has really afflicted uh, people. Uh, that I think there might be something to that. Maybe I'm going off my own life experience and what I've seen. in academia and the sciences, but you know, to compare it to where we're at in the world now, I see like there's been a tendency in the contemporary academic world for everybody to write in an increasingly convergent, boring, and stale style, and that may be reflected in a broader sense in which I worry that modern social forces are pushing people towards a kind of a lack of drive and ambition to be genuinely individual, and to self actualize and to and maybe the way Nietzsche might put it, is like create your own values or something like that. Um, a lot of people, I think, this modern moral conception that everybody has, that we people just seem like they don't want to. It looks like I don't know. People are just I don't know how to articulate this, but I think he was pointing to the sense that there's one of the worst things that could happen to humanity, to civilization, is for people to lose a personal, ambitious drive and spirit to create, to achieve, to become something, and to just want to, you know, sit in front of the proverbial couch and watch Netflix all day. And of course, I'm putting this in modern terms, but I think there's something to that, to not being a saint in the conventional sense of being a saint in the eyes of others, but having a vision of what you want to see in the world and freaking making it happen. There's something I like about that element. Now, I worry that the kind of people that would be ambitious in those respects, their vision of the world would be an ugly and awful one. But to the extent that people develop the strength of will to actually try to do something, I think that that's an important aspect of humanity making progress and achieving something in the world. Dude who does stuff says, Metaethics aside, do you have any atypical applied ethical positions? Not any I'd want to talk about, probably. Yeah, not something I would talk about. Do I really have any? Not really. Not I don't think so. Um, maybe a couple, but I don't know if I'd want to talk about them. Not because I'm like, oh yeah, well, yeah, there's some applied stuff I probably wouldn't want to talk about. Um, there might be specific things I would be willing to talk about, but it would have to be very specific. Oh, Greg John had also asked about Hegel. I've never read anything from Hegel that didn't look like complete gibberish to me. It looks like total nonsense. If there's anything to Hegel that's not, if he's not a complete hack, I'd be amazed. It just looks like gibberish to me. I don't know what he's talking about. So Pierce says, Lance, would you remind me of what specific critique that Ask Yourself directed at Alex O'Connor about desires was? Was he saying desires and values are identical? Not sure I remember the exact term. Oh man, you're going to ask me to try to recall this. Uh, I don't think I could recall off the top of my head at the moment. Ugh. But yeah, it was something like uh, Alex's account either requiring him to establish some sort of connection between uh, two things he was making claims about, or if he's treating them as tautologies, then what he was saying is like could just sorry treating them as synonyms, then it would like what he was saying would be completely vacuous and wouldn't amount to saying anything. Like people desire what they desire. Um, so like if you say people desire what's valuable, well, what is it? What is it for something to be valuable? Well, it's what you desire. Then to say that someone desires what they value would be like saying they desire what they desire. So basically, uh, Ask Yourself was catching him in a kind of catch 22 where it was like if he basically was confronted with a dilemma where it's like if he goes one route, then he's saying completely vacuous and empty stuff. If he's going another route, he'd have a very steep hill to climb that he hasn't climbed. So uh, it's kind of a lose lose for Alex, and I think he showed that completely convincingly in the original video. But I can't recall the specifics at the moment. I see my I when I look at the screen and I see my eyes increasingly getting narrower. Uh, I know that I'm like falling asleep while I'm here. Okay, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Okay, Truman Show is great. Predator One is great. I don't expect you to be such a big fan of Avatar. Also very good. Favorite film is Traffic. Never seen it. Anything by Steven Soderbergh is good. I don't even remember or know who that is. Um, oh, what was that movie I saw that was really weird and I liked it? Synecdoche, New York. Is that it? Synecdoche. That was a cool movie, but I can barely remember it. Marcus says if you like Nietzsche, you might like Spinoza. He's more prescient than Nietzsche, more systematic. Yeah, I found Spinoza a little too systematic when I read his work as an undergrad. Like Axiom 1 and given Axiom 1 and Corollary 2, this and this follows. I didn't read much more Spinoza than that. So don't know a whole lot about his views. Barney Mayerson, Nietzsche podcast by Keegan Kjeldsen is an awesome deep dive into Nietzsche. I might check it out. GPW, not remotely surprising that an anti-realist would have an appreciation for sci-fi and horror. Yeah, I like the Lovecraftian aesthetic, like deep ineffable horrors that could tear apart the world and make everybody insane. Something about that I really like. I don't know why. I don't actually so I don't like horror movies because I get scared by them. I don't really know why I like them, but yeah, I like stuff like oh, you know a movie I like? Cube. I think it's a cool movie. I think it's underrated. I wouldn't say it's like extraordinary movie, but it's cool for what it is. Like a room that's basically filmed in sorry, a movie that's filmed like in like a room. Um, oh, it's a cool movie. Maybe this is a stupid one and people will hate that I like this, but or maybe not know what I'm talking about. Man from Earth. I thought that was a cool movie. Like the whole movie is a dialogue on a couch for the most part. There's a couple scenes outside of there, but for the most part, it's people talking. Like the whole movie. But what I remember about the movie is I went over to a friend's house and he's like, "Hey, you got to watch this." And I don't even remember what happened. Like I just got there. I don't even, we were, I don't know if we were going to go do something else, like play video games or something. He's like, "Hey, sit down and watch this." So I sat down and watched it and I didn't get up. I watched the whole damn movie, start to finish, didn't move. I was riveted by it. I thought it was really cool. Uh, Maybe it's a crap movie again if I watched it. I was a lot younger. Anyway, I like that movie. Um, I gotta go about maybe what movies I don't like popular movies. I'm not really into the Marvel movies that much. I kind of soured on them over time. What else? What else? What else? What's good stuff? Memento. I like Memento. That was a cool movie. Uh, what else is good? Oh, hmm. Like Ratatouille. That was a good movie. Up. I liked Up. Yeah. Thoughts on Hegel? Not. I'm haven't really enjoyed any Hegel stuff that I've been compelled to read. If I'm being honest. Maybe I haven't given Hegel a fair shake, but can't make sense of it. I have a problem with obscure writers. I just have very little patience for it. As far as which thinkers have you been most blown away by? I don't think I've been blown away by anybody. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I'm not big on specific people. Forget names. I don't know who people are. Um, I forget who, like people will tell me, "Hey, what about this person?" And like I had a conversation. I don't remember the conversation. I don't remember the person. I don't remember anything. Um, so that happens a lot. Like someone earlier in the chat asked me about a conversation. I don't remember I don't know anything about it. So apparently I had a conversation. I don't know what that was about. So I don't know. I don't remember. Like maybe I remember if someone reminded me, but I don't know anything about that. So apparently I don't know. Did I? I don't know. Uh, so yeah, I don't focus a lot on philosophers or specific thinkers. I tend to care about ideas more. I mean, I like to give people credit for ideas. Like, Gil had this idea, but I don't focus on the people that much. So I don't have a lot of like intellectual heroes. And not that I necessarily think there's anything wrong with people do. I don't track people very well. Like I just don't. And I might have 6 conversations with a person and I can't remember who they are or whether we've spoken before. So Sorry. I mean, that's just how I am. I have to see people a lot to really have it internalized, like who they are and who I'm talking to. Otherwise, I don't know. So it's unfortunate, but that appears to be just how my brain is. Uh, yeah, Craig. Like if you're asking about like Jung and Freud, I got to be honest, not a big fan of. Like it's not like stuff I've done a deep dive into, but from what I've seen, it's not really my thing. Synecdoche, yeah, New York. Yeah, it was a cool movie. All right, people talking about Nietzsche and Spinoza. Who's most blown you away by their brilliance or intelligence? I'm trying to think if there's anybody where I've just been like, whoa, like people historically or currently. Like I've met smart people before, but I'm not I'm not that blown away by intelligence. People could be real smart and have real goofy views. People could be not the smartest, and I think that they're good thinkers. Sometimes I use the analogy of yeah. Well, I'm not going to use that; it's cheesy. Uh, but I don't know. I don't care that much about people being super duper smart. So I'm sorry if I'm not engaging with the question adequately. I like to try to answer questions, but uh, blown away. I can't think of anybody. You've definitely seen a ton of his movies, like the Ocean's trilogy, like Ocean's 11, like those movies. Is that what you're talking about? Oh, this is surprising. I've never seen The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. Yeah, I haven't seen it. Rick he says, "Thank you. You're awesome. Have a good weekend." Yeah, I'm so sorry if I don't like some of your favorite philosophers. Yeah, I'm not big on the on like Hegel. I'm not big on like continental stuff and like especially obscure people that are hard to read. Nietzsche's kind of hard to read for me, but yeah, still I guess a fun read for me. Maybe that's an exception. Ah, see, this is what I'm talking about. So I didn't see 2001 Space Odyssey until like when was that? About 10 years ago. So like not that long ago. Like I was already like finishing up grad school and everything. And I remember I didn't know of a good way to get a hold of it. And it was at like the library at my university. So I had it like on a CD. So um yeah, I like rented the movie. It's like seems like really archaic. Like I rode to town on a horse and buggy. Um, so I rented the movie, popped it in, got some food, started watching it. Absolutely loved it. It was so weird. I mean, these slow scenes that just drag out, and it's just so slow. And something about it, like every scene, I just liked, and I just enjoyed looking at them. I just was like looking around. It was just trapped in an eerie world. The atmosphere of the movie is just, I really, really, I guess maybe a lot of people hate that movie and think it's really boring. But I thought it was really cool. Really loved it. Thought it was strange and weird, and I wish there were more things like that. Okay. Oh, whoa. Am I getting caught up to the chat? Holy crap. Because I just talked about that like a couple minutes ago. Yeah, Ocean's 11, exactly. Yeah, I saw a couple of the Ocean's movies. Jimmy, sorry to flood the chat with all the movie business. I don't care. It's late at night. It's what? It's 11 or something. I could talk about whatever I feel like. This is a chill stream. I do enough streams talking about serious stuff. I could be chill. So happy to talk about movies. I'm not a big movie and TV person these days. If I watch shows, it's mostly cooking shows. I watch MasterChef Brazil. I don't like the American MasterChef. Um, I watch a British baking show. There's some cake competition show I watch. I can't remember the name of it. It's like a detective cake show. Like they show up and they have to look at a kitchen where that's been used, and they have to like put together what was made, and then the It's I don't know. I liked it. What is it called? I don't know. Sapir says, would you be willing to bring up the timestamp about the mini relation problem in Kane B's video on correspondence theory? I think it's only a few minutes, or maybe another time. Definitely another time. I'm not up for that now. My brain is about at its limit. I think it was at its limit like an hour ago because I don't even know if I'm conscious anymore. Wait, I don't think I'm conscious anyway, right? Because hey, if you have a view like me, you don't believe in consciousness. Greg John, why is every philosophy person's second favorite topic films? Films are, I don't even know what topic, where they would be on the list, but like 26 or something. It's not my favorite topic or second favorite topic. My second favorite topic is probably philosophy. My first favorite topic is food. So I could talk about food for eternity. You don't want to get me started on that. I will talk about everything. I also just tend to be critical. So I'll talk more about movies I don't like than ones I do like. Hey, at least with food, I don't talk about what I hate. I talk about what I like. Uh, Peer, so I don't watch movies and shows very much. Yeah, I don't these days either. Greg just, I wasn't being sarcastic. I'm all out of questions. Oh, I knew you weren't being sarcastic. I just know if you're asking me about, yeah. Sorry. Now I can't. No, I'm losing my speech. I know if you ask me about Hegel, I'm assuming you like Hegel. And so if I'm like, it sounds like a bunch of nonsense to me, that could be disappointing. That, I'm not going to have anything interesting to say about something you like. Yeah, maybe perspective philosophy will see this and be like, oh my God, because he's big Hegelian. Oh, right. Favorite novels. All right, all right. Okay, getting into the novels. So I read a ton of fantasy and a bit of science fiction. In terms of favorite novels, I do have a favorite one. It's Siberiad by Stanislaw Lem, as a Polish science fiction author. I don't read Polish. I have the English translation, but wow. I mean, if the original is better, and it's because the English translation is so damn good, it's ridiculous. So Siberiad is I think maybe it's based on the Iliad, like the Siberiad. Like roughly the idea is it's an alternate universe, or it's another universe where the impression I get, maybe it's explicitly stated in the book, but whatever, I'll just lay it out. Um, it looks like the world has gone through epochs in which organic life emerges, dies out, or sorry, organic life emerges, builds AI, dies out, the AI persists for a while, maybe that dies out, then organic life reemerges. So it's basically a world in which um, the dominant life forms that are described seem to be like androids or like robotic beings, or like artificial life. They're machines, and I guess they reproduce by building more machines. I don't know. Uh, Sometimes they sound weirdly biological, even though they're machines. Anyway, the two main characters are I don't know how to say their names, Trurl and Klopocius, and they're engineers. They invent. They love to invent, and they just sort of aggressively invent things. They kind of are like frenemies. They travel together, but they're very competitive, and they'll fight and argue a lot. But they travel the cosmos on these grand adventures. The first few parts of the book, it's like a bunch of short stories. They're called Sallies, like they sally forth. And then it has the Siberia collected a few other stories, and basically they go on adventures, and it has a weird mix of chivalry and medieval romance type stuff, as a weird backdrop and aesthetic, mixed with um, comedy and hard science fiction. And so it has like both the light elements of science fiction and on occasion hard science fiction. What the hell? It is the weirdest book. But I mean, so it has really cool stuff, like a poetry telling machine that's so good at telling poems that it starts becoming a problem. Like all the poets get mad because it puts them out of a job. Uh, and so they go to stop it, but it recites poetry so beautiful that they like break down in tears and they can't hurt it anymore. And it just becomes increasingly a threat to the world because it's just unstoppable with its poetry. Um, that one's cool. They have a story where they're telling a story. So someone shows up to tell a story about a storytelling robot, and then the storytelling robot tells a story about a person that tells a story. And so what's weird is like each one of these stories gets developed. So it's a story about a story about a story about a story. And then you're in like the fourth story, and then it finishes that story, and then you go back to the third story, and then it finishes that story. And you go back to the second story. So it peels back all the layers like Inception, but in story form. Oh my God, it's so cool. It's so weird. It's like, I don't even know what you call it. Is it like avant-garde? I don't even know. It's like real weird science fiction. and I just love every minute of it. It's just so silly and goofy and strange. Um, yeah, there's a what's the machine? They have a machine that oh, the poetry machine. It does poems about mathematics that are just so cool and weird. It's great. I love it. Uh, so I haven't read a lot of Lim's other stuff. I really should. I've picked up a couple books and I just haven't read them. But I love Siberia. It's weird because I'm like, this is my favorite book ever, and then I just don't read the other stuff by the same person. Okay. Um. Oh. What are they? Who's the author? I'll get the name in a second. Ted Chiang. Yeah. So Stories of Our Lives. It's was it Stories of Our Lives and Others? It's a collection of short stories, and then Exhalation. They're both two volumes of short stories, all from Ted Chiang. Every single story is good. Some I don't like quite as much. I'm like, yeah, decent sci-fi, but some of them are some of my favorite science fiction of all time. They're just super duper awesome, and I love them. And both of those volumes are just absolutely excellent. You could get on Audible Arthur C. Clarke's collected works of short stories, and it's like 60 hours or something of Audible time. So many good stories in there. So Arthur C. Clarke, Ted Chiang. One of my favorite like horror science fiction is George Martin, same author as Song of Ice and Fire. I really should say has a short story called Sand Kings. That one's really cool. That's more, I guess, more of a novella. As far as like fantasy, okay, so that's all the science fiction stuff. There's more, but whatever. Oh, I like the Bobaverse stuff. That's more recent stuff. I like that stuff. That stuff's cool. Whatever. Let me pop open my Audible, and I can just tell you what some of the books are. I've been oh, I like these. The Mage Errant series. It maybe that's more of a young adult series, but I actually like the stories. I think the magic system, this John Bierce is the author. The magic system he develops in that is really, really cool. And there's like different worlds and they each have their own magic system, and I just think it's pretty cool. Um, it's more like just fun stuff to listen to. But whatever, I don't care. I like it. I'm allowed to be entertained. What else we got? I'm trying to go through here and find stuff. Oh, Brandon Sanderson. He just put out a like the Secret Projects books. And those are really cool. But so Sanderson, I like the Sanderson stuff. The Mistborn stuff is my favorite from him. I haven't been quite as happy with the Stormlight stuff. Feels like those books got way too long. Needed some editing or something. Um, also didn't like the direction some of the story went in. But yeah, Tress of the Emerald Sea. That one was good. It's one of his short stories. I mean, short story. I guess it's a full story. I don't know, but they're not very long. All right, what else we got? What else we got? Those are okay. That was okay. I'm looking through my list of books and I'm trying to find ones that I'm not embarrassed to tell you. Oh yeah, these are cool. The Aiden saga, the last book was The Bitter Crown. It's just two books in the series so far. I like that one. That's a fantasy series. And by the way, I'm scrolling through just like dozens of fantasy books that are probably too embarrassing to tell you about. Yeah, see, I'll mention one of the ones that's a little embarrassing, but I like it. There's this series called Beware of Chicken. Uh, I'm not even going to explain that one, but I like those. So if you think that's ridiculous, if you look it up, too bad. What else? I want to get to some of the science fiction. Where is it? It's fantasy, fantasy, fantasy. Jeez. I know I do science fiction sometimes. Oh, yeah, the Isaac Asimov stuff. I know they're all out here. So I like that stuff. Mm, trying to find stuff. Got some Dan Dennett books. Yeah, the Bobaverse ones, those are good. Uh, oh yeah, these are cool. The Perfect Run, I like those. Probably not gonna. Oh yeah, The Martian, that was a good book. Uh, yeah, A Thousand Lee, I like that book series. It's a cultivation novels. Those are cool. Okay, there's just too many here. That's enough. Okay, you got a lot of books. All right, as far as favorite novels. Yeah, there's a couple like classic stuff. I like 1984. I thought that was fine. Um, fine. Yeah, I like 1984. It was cool. What are some other classics? Classic science fiction. I don't know. I read some back in the day. I don't remember a lot of it. And then classic fantasy stuff. Yeah, Lord of the Rings. It's great. Yeah. I remember reading The Hobbit as a kid. Love that. Um, and they had that old school, like the animated film, like the rotoscope one. That was really cool. I like that one. I still remember it. It's a little weird, but I like it. Yeah. So well, I never read like the Silmarillion. I just read like the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit. And I like those. But I didn't get like I'm not one of those people that like knows everything about the lore. But uh seriously, you don't even think you're tired right now. Yeah, if you're an eliminativist, there's no such thing as being tired, right? Analytic philosophy says, "What don't you like about MasterChef US? Seems kind of artificial. Didn't like it. It seems very kind of contrived. I thought I like the judges better for the Brazil one. Minority Report. Yep, good movie. So Pierce says you can't say you like food if you can't even experience tasting things. You can't. Well, I can because I am. So too bad. W says Stanislaw Lem has been moldering in my Kindle for years. Moved up to the top of the reading list. Good. Yeah, let me know what you think. Probably not for everybody. Yeah, see, Solaris is another one I just haven't. I have it on Audible too. I haven't listened to it, and I have what is the other one I have on Audible? Can't remember. I have a few by him. I haven't. So Barney Mayerson says I haven't read anything by Lim. I know he wrote Solaris. I've been meaning to get to that. Have you read Moderan by David Bunch? Nope, don't know what that is. I saw Rival based on one of Chang's stories. Great movie. Yeah, you know it's funny is it was based on my least favorite story out of Stories of Our Lives and Others, uh, like that series. Maybe that is the titular short story. I don't even know if it's based on one of the books. Yeah, it is because Exhalation. I think the first book, the first story in Exhalation is Exhalation, and then it has a bunch of other ones. Um, but yeah, I didn't really like the Arrival one that much. If I'm being honest, I mean the stuff about language you might think it'd be my favorite, but it just eh, is good, but I think the other ones are better. Maybe there's worse ones. I don't know. But I just thought there were other stories in there that stood out to me more. Ever read Tolstoy? Um, I don't think so. A lot of classic stuff I haven't read. What did Tolstoy write? I don't know. Maybe that's stupid for me to not know that. Who wrote what is it? Anna Karenina? I read that. I didn't really like it. Oh, wait, that was that Tolstoy? Okay, I guess I did read it. Okay. Didn't care for it. Yeah, that book is featured prominently at the beginning of Nick Shader's The Mind is Flat, and I was kind of like, I didn't really like that story. But no, he uses it in a good way. Hold on. The last question. The last question. Let me remind myself what the last question is. Ah, yeah. Okay, give me a second. I remember this. Yeah, this is that one that's really short, right? Like you read it in like 5 minutes. I don't remember what I thought about other than thinking it was super cool. Half of you suspects it might be correct. Uh, so I don't want to. Let me just put a link to it in here. Wait, am I? Is this something you just link? Anyway, go check out the last question. Look it up. You'll be able to find it. But it's very cool. It's worth a read. Nah, I like 1984 more than Brave New World. So I've heard of this. I have no mouth that I must scream, but I don't remember reading anything like that. Is that? Yeah. See, this is the stuff that I read, like Philip K. Dick and was it Robert Heinlein and Harlan Ellison? I feel like I've read all this stuff and I can't remember any of it. I remember one where there's like aliens on Jupiter or something. They're like blue. They look like centaurs. Is that a book? What is that? That's just a random memory. I'm going insane. Soderbergh adapted Solaris as well. Is it good though? Because when I checked it on IMDb, it didn't even have particularly good reviews. Although then again, Siberia doesn't really have the greatest reviews when I've looked it up. It's people are kind of like about it. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's my favorite thing ever. Jimothy says Tolstoy wrote War and Peace and Anna Karenina. Is that how you say it? Karenina? I'm probably mispronouncing it. War and Peace is much better. I don't like Anna. Yeah, I thought it was fine. Like I didn't think it was a bad story. I just didn't care that much. I'm just okay. That's a story. Like stuff happened. It just didn't really draw me in. Yeah, look, I'm not going to have any pedigree for having done a good job reading all these. Like I read what Brothers Karamazov. Had some good lines. I thought a lot of it was just real boring. So no, I like stuff with robots and lasers. Like what's one? Dungeon Crawler Carl. Yeah, see, I mean, it's a guy running around in his underwear like punching things. Like I like books. I'm sorry, I like books like that. So look, my lack of interest in like the Marvel movies isn't because I'm not all about like Thor crushing people with a hammer or something. I'm all about that. I just found the movies to get too self-indulgent with the comedy, too many jokes, and like I just wanted to see some ass kicking, and I wanted it to be a little more serious, and it just wasn't, and I just got kind of tired of it. Yeah. Timothy says I have aphantasia, so reading fiction is difficult. Ah, interesting. I don't know. I don't think I have particularly good mental imagery. I'm probably a little below average. Yeah, normal guy says I also like sci-fi, but instead of books, I prefer comics. So I never got into comics. Never had them. Both my brothers like them. I'm just not a comic person. I don't know. Just never got into it. Read any Kafka? I don't think so. Kafka. No, if it doesn't have robots and lasers or dragons and explosions, um, probably not reading it. It's Kafka, right? That's why I won't even read half the stuff in Audible to you. It's just too embarrassing. Yeah, not really familiar with Kafka. Wait, really? Oh, I see. I think something like 500 something books on Audible, so I got a lot here, but it's mostly fantasy stuff. Yeah, I thought He Who Fights the Monsters. I like the beginning of that, and then it kind of dropped off for me, lost interest. I'm only on page 10, and there's like 27 pages. Let's see what happened with that one. Yeah, I'm looking through my list still. Yeah, the Skyward series from Sanderson, that was good. I like those. I don't think I finished them. All right, is that enough books? I'm just talking about books at this point. Okay. I caught up to the stream, so 2.5 hours, but I did it. So I'm gonna call it quits there. So I saw I was coming up on it and I got caught up. All right, everybody. That's gonna do it for me. That was a lot of fun at the end there, just kind of talking about just nothing, I guess, just chilling. Wow, my stream was so much lamer than Nathan's. Nathan's talking about all this cool stuff, and but at least I got to 2.5 hours. It's not bad. Yeah, sometimes it's okay to be chill. And hey, I did a couple serious recorded videos already, so go check those out. Check out my discussion with Derek McAllister, who was in here in the stream earlier. So welcome, Derek, for being here. I'm probably not here now. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me. So do the usual: like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. check me out in the comments. Check the description for my link tree, which will take you to my links to everywhere else. That's the most unenthusiastic self-endorsement ever, but that's what you're going to get at this hour. See y'all later. Take care, everybody.